My research paper was on fetal alcohol syndrome. For the introduction, what is fetal alcohol syndrome? Or FAS. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a type of disability from which the mother consumes alcohol while pregnant with a fetus, and a fetus they absorb the alcohol much longer than the mother does, and it has like lasting effects. And I remember even like a while back that they were saying 1 glass of wine a day is fine, but researchers have shown that there's no safe amount of alcohol to consume while pregnant. So, for the best measurement of prevention, which fetal alcohol syndrome obviously is 100% preventable, just if trying to or while being pregnant, just consume zero alcohol. Why research this? It is important to research fetal alcohol syndrome because, as I'll discuss later, it is not covered under the IDEA Act. It has many secondary effects that are related to fetal alcohol syndrome, like things like ADHD, levels of autism, and like behavioral disabilities, learning disabilities, and those are covered. So, but it's in and itself, fetal alcohol syndrome is not covered. So that is what's important to understand. Characteristics of fetal alcohol syndrome in a child. Physically, there's like deformities in the face, it's like a smooth upper lip. Um, they're shorter in stature. Academically, I mean, obviously, along with many other like brain, because it's more so considered like a brain injury. Uh, it affects them academically, behaviorally, and socially, and it kind of all intertwines in the same way, where they're prone to outbursts. They struggle primarily, like mostly in math. That's what's shown the most. And socially, because if they have like short temperaments and they're not able to like control their emotions or understand their social environments, and they don't really understand when they're doing something bad, that it all kind of affects itself. Because when a child in school isn't having a great time socially and like is getting in trouble a lot, obviously that's going to affect their academics along with the already problems, as I mentioned before, that can come with like things like ADHD and stuff like that. And then is it lifelong as a characteristic? Yes, it is. It's something that if you're born with it, it kind of just affects you your entire life. Um, excuse me, there's no cure, like quote unquote cure for fetal alcohol syndrome. There are just like measures in place similar to like dyslexia where you try to just help them adapt and essentially learn how to live with it in a healthier manner. Support services, but there are not a lot of support services. Um, Early intervention is key, along with like many other learning disabilities. I guess I'll go back to dyslexia. Is when like the earlier you can like catch it, the earlier you can detect it, the better, because then the child can cope earlier with like I guess not cope, but like overcome and adapt and understand their emotions and regulate their emotions, and things like delayed speech or things like hearing and visual impairment, which are also like a big factor in fetal alcohol syndrome. You can just understand early on, like, hey, do they need glasses? Do they need these like technology helps? Do they need closed captions? Do they need bigger text? All those kind of things. And then these supportive groups are like intervention specialists, like speech therapists, like one-on-one with like just at school interventions, um, technology assisted courses that are more geared toward and directed towards the child to help them. If they're in a first grade class, but they're able to keep up with everything but, like math or reading or something, then they can obviously stay with their normal kids, but when it comes time for the intervention, they can have their Chromebook, which is like used a lot now, to have very individualized and catered uh, courses for them. And this also like lifelong, like I said, it's lifelong. So this helps them with like independence. They can like, problem solve on their own if they need to. They understand how to like do these things on their own, obviously with help along the way, but it also helps them with like with their like future lives of like learning how to be independent and understanding, that everything's not, step by step. So like those kind of technologies are great. And it overlaps a lot. Excuse me. It overlaps a lot, like on the side here with things like ADHD and the visual and hearing impairments, which are pretty common, especially to get IEPs. I know people who have hearing who were born with hearing loss, and they even got things as simple as extra time on tests, and then especially behaviorally for those with fetal alcohol syndrome, if they get overwhelmed, and especially if you like let them test in a smaller room in a better environment, because another thing is like visually they can get distracted easily. So if they're in like a classroom setting and they're taking longer than everybody else to do their tests, assessments, and quizzes and stuff, that kids, other children are going to get bored, and then they're going to like play with their pencil or something, and that can be very distracting. So a better environment for them can maybe just let them do it with the intervention specialist or in like a designated testing room where there is little to no distractions, stuff like that. Um, and then, yeah, so the overlap, again, as I stated a few times, like ADHD, stuff like that. And the misconception, they get misdiagnosed a lot because there is so much overlap with fetal alcohol syndrome with these other conditions that that's essentially what they end up falling under, even though it is fetal alcohol syndrome. And then in my paper, one of the researchers that I looked up, it says that I think it was 53% of mothers have consumed some amount of alcohol during pregnancy, which leads to anywhere from minor, moderate to severe levels of fetal alcohol syndrome. So it's very important, and it's very, as I'll talk about a little bit more moving forward. Is fetal alcohol syndrome covered under IDEA? No, it is not directly under there. But as I said, with the overlap, most of the kids get some kind of help, and they are covered under that and FATE and things like that because of the overlap. But as of now, directly it is not, although there are um, some places, like in California, excuse me, they recognize it, but federally it's not recognized. And there is advocacy groups trying to push for more awareness and for that to be federally recognized as a learning disability, because it is something like that. It affects them their whole lives, and it's very important to help them through and give them the help they need. So what we can do now to help is do what we can, understand, communicate with the specialists, and communicate with parents or guardians, and just try to better understand the children. Just like every child in your class, they all have different needs. They're all at different levels. It's not just as simple as handing them a worksheet and just expecting them to get it. So just understanding the child, understanding what they need, and just do what you can, as an educator, and work with who you can work with. So in conclusion, we learned that fetal alcohol syndrome, it's lifelong. It affects many aspects of the child, that, from a child to adult, physically, emotionally, mentally, especially academically. Um, we learned that technically it's not covered directly, which is kind of important. We learned that there are many methods that have been used and are continue to be used where you can use the overlapping tools that we have to just help these children, learn and grow and still develop as, at a normal pace. And then what educators and policies may expect moving forward is something, with these groups pushing it, and with, you know, more eyes on a problem and more eyes on a situation. Eventually, these kind of things, they take time, but eventually fetal alcohol syndrome, I see becoming more accepted as a learning disability in its of itself. There's currently 13 like classifications in IDEA. I think fetal alcohol syndrome directly is involved with 12. Let me quick double check what number 12 was. I apologize. It is traumatic brain injury is number 12. Um, I think because that's what it is. It's a brain injury. It's essentially at the end of the day. Yeah, there's like physical things that it affects, like I said, with the shorter stature and the smooth lip, like smooth upper lip, and facial feature differences. But it is like its own thing. It's not essentially like it happened in utero, so they're born with it. And they nothing, there's nothing they can do to change it. So moving forward, hopefully it's more accepted. And yeah, and then there's my reference page.